Thanks so much, Daniel. I'm so sorry I had to run around and do all those things just before, just before we started the webinar.
That's all good.
Oh, it's funny, it's like it, it's only week 8, but it doesn't feel like week 8, does it?
No, it's a bit of a weird, particularly with the extra days at the start of the year, was a little bit different. Yeah, a bit of a
Right.
different way of starting the term made sort of the first bit sort of rush a little bit, I think. So,
Mm. And it's sort of benchmarking now on like where we'd normally be in, say, week 8, but it's not really week 8 theoretically because it wasn't. It's just this kind of. I keep giggling to myself, kind of in the capacity of the unusual start to the year. I mean, we got more time and we got more time to spend with schools, but it's yeah, it is making me feel yeah, my mind is going a little crazy, which is an okay thing.
yeah, that's
Um,
right.
so what we might do is I'd love to kick off on time just so that we can get everyone home and back to their families or snuggled up on the couch where you are this evening. My name is Nikki Bonus and I'm the CEO and the founder of Life Skills Go. I'm just going to go over a couple of little housekeeping things and then we'll dive straight in because we're not here to find out about Life Skills Go. We're really here to find out about Daniel and your journey with Life Skills Go. I'd just like to start by, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea, and community. We pay our respect to elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people today. Just a tiny bit of housekeeping. So, for those of you that are wrangling young people or eating dinners or jumping in and out of doing things this evening, we will be sending this recording out. So, if you do have to leave, that's absolutely okay. This session is really, first and foremost, this session is really about learning from a school who's done their journey, yet every school is different. It is a really interactive webinar. So, I really invite you to pop the questions in the chat. We've got some wonderful members of our team who will be manning that chat. And the busier it gets, the more we love it. And Daniel's probably sitting there going, no, not too many, but he is a wealth of knowledge. And one day ago, poor Daniel is like, oh gosh, Nikki and her throwing me under the bus moment again. But we're here because, Life Skills Go is an education company that has built technology to support schools. And we can't do that without working hand in hand with our school communities and school communities like we have this evening with Shortland. Part of that is also every community is different and everyone will set up different frameworks. But at the end of the day, every school has young people. And Life Skills Go is here to ensure that no young person falls through the gaps and that we surface the right information at the right time and provide that to the right people so that we begin to work and allow schools to work in a preventative space while saving on administration time and ensuring that our students' voices are heard, and also that wellbeing data is triangulated and brought to the right people. So again, please pop anything into the chat box. Um, at the end of the session, there is a very short survey. That survey is really for us to be able to find out what topics do you want, what are you looking for, and how can we continue to support you as an ongoing community and the needs of a community. I'm not going to read my bio. I've been in education a really long time. I've been developing programs hand in hand with schools and communities, not only through Australia, but also internationally. My passion is to really be able to ensure that every child's voice is heard, that every child is seen, and that we are able to provide proactive, responsive needs to not only our students, but also our schools to be able to help them to thrive and to be able to thrive not only in their academics, but all areas of their life. I'm going to move over to the star of this evening, which is our beautiful Daniel. Daniel, thank you so much for being here this evening. I don't like reading off a slide, but I will leave that up there because you have had a really amazing career to date, and I have had the privilege of working with you over quite a period of time now. I suppose just as I could introduce you in your role, but I think first I'll pass it over to you, maybe just to introduce yourself, your school community, and maybe something I always say that education is, it's not, working in education or working in schools is not easy. There's always something that motivates us to get up every day. So if you wouldn't mind sharing something along those lines, that would be a fantastic place to start.
Yeah, definitely. So, yeah, Daniel Payne is my name. So I'm assistant principal at Shortland Public School, where I've been now for around 6 years. So essentially, the school itself is around 250 students. We currently have 10 mainstream classes and 7 inclusive ed classes. So that includes 3 ED, 2 AU autism classes, and 2 multi-cat classes as well. So quite a complex little school site. We also have around 35% Indigenous and around 20% English as an additional language. So we really have quite a diverse group in terms of socioeconomic status. We've again got quite a range there, from some people, quite socially disadvantaged, through to some families, not so. So there really is a really big range within the school. And I suppose one of the things that I've loved working with the school itself is it's just such a broad context of students and families, and it's just a really rich melting pot of things. So it's a great experience and something that I've loved being a part of. In terms of sort of what motivates me each day and things like that, it's been really nice to be able to make a difference, I suppose, in a lots of different kids' lives. So I've been lucky enough to work at a number of schools with various socioeconomic statuses and things like that. But I suppose currently being able to, I suppose, hopefully make a bigger difference to kids' whole lives. School's only that very small part at the start of their lives. And I suppose now I want to hopefully give them the skills to be able to go and deal with the obviously ever-changing world that we live in today. So I think that's probably where for me, the greatest joy is when you see a student that maybe you've taught over the last few years, and I can think of numerous that come to mind, whether they come visit from high school or, you might see them out and about in the community, and just actually, hear them come and say hello, tell you what they're doing, and that, hopefully not always great stories, but generally it's nice to hear that, where they're going to school or heading off to university or starting a family or whatever that might be now. Yeah, you've made that little impact in their life and hopefully set them up to pass that on to somebody else.
I'm sitting here smiling as you're sharing that, because every interaction I've had with you and the interaction I've had with your school, that kind of comes through in every single phone call or every single email or every interaction. And I think, I love what you said. We were recently running a parent webinar, and one of the facilitators was talking about, when we get a young person, we also get the whole community. And we're dealing with, education is really around relationships, and how do we build those relationships. And I think that kind of leads me into, I'd like to sort of, I suppose, just start at the base level, particularly around when you were looking for something. So, our traditional methods of measuring well-being is behavior, attendance, teachers' observation. And I know that, your school was really looking for something. What was it that you kind of identified that you weren't getting, or what was kind of that granularity around looking for something more?
So we took a really holistic approach to wellbeing across the whole school. So that looked at the framework. So we did a lot of work with Bruce Perry's NME program. We looked at the hand brain model as well. So we looked at a lot around those things, and I suppose zones of regulation is another sort of component of all that. And one of the things that we really looked for was what something that I suppose we can make uniform across the school, but also we know everyone says, "Oh, not another program." We're just going to run
Hmm.
another program. It's another thing we'll do for 3 years, and then we'll throw it out and we'll pick up another
Hmm.
program. We'll start all over again. So sustainability is a really big part of that. Not adding to teachers' workload was another big part of that, and also that uniformity that I think from Life Skills Go point of view, like every classroom we can get the data from as into where kids are at as needed. So whereas when you're using, say, peg charts or different things like that on zones and other things like that that people were running in their rooms individually, it still required a level of teacher, at the time responding straight away to that. It wasn't uniform across the school, so there was lots of various methods that were running. So it was Life Skills Go probably gave us the opportunity to have one streamlined sort of approach, but also recorded that data, because you
Mm.
put something on a peg chart, that's great, but who sees that data? how do I show a parent that data or bring that up later on? So that was probably another sort of component for us that really helped to sell it, in terms of when we first adopted it. And then also, originally we were with Central and moved across to Schoolbite. So the
Mhm.
fact that, yeah, we're able to have that integrated with attendance and things like that, again, sort of removed another layer or another step out of that for us as well. So doing that, and then I suppose in terms of the gaps, really looking at, being proactive with our well-being and behaviour management, and not so reactive.
Mm.
I found throughout my 20 years now of teaching that, traditionally we're very reactive. Something happens, and
Yeah.
then we, all react, and we all run and do all the things that we've all learnt to do. Whereas I think, now, in particular, our approach at Shortland is to be as proactive as possible and try and get in front. If there's an issue there, well, let's work out what that is and do with it as we go.
Can you give me any, like, well, you might, sorry, I'm really putting you on the spot, but can you give me an example of what that might look like in a day? Like, has there been something that so we're talking about real-time wellbeing data here. And sorry, because there might be a lot of people that don't quite know what we're talking about, and I'm sort of leaning in. Has there been something for you in your role that you've found out, that you would never have known, that has led to a proactive or a preventative incident
Yeah, well, I mean,
engagement?
there's been numerous, yeah, there's been lots of numerous different things. So often in my role, in well-being, so that sort of revolved a little bit around being off class or different things like that. So being able to jump on and have a bit of a look and noticing patterns within classrooms, or some, another good one where the data came in really handy was there were some issues going on in the playground with some of our year 3 girls a couple of years ago. And you could see straight away, sort of, this person was checked in angry, this person checked in upset, and these other 3 people checked in worried. So by being able to just quickly jump on and have a little bit of a look on the dashboard, I was actually able to ring up to the classroom and say, hey, not sure what's happening. Do you want to just check in with these guys? But I can pretty much tell you who's involved. And so
Yeah.
that's been really, good. Yeah, like it was pretty much straight away data on that one as to who was involved in that sort of incident.
And it'd be
Another
no
one was,
coincidence that if we didn't get in front of, we often, like you were saying, we have the privilege, sorry for jumping in there, but, you know, how often do we, have an incident that breaks out at lunchtime or at recess or in social groups or whatever? And if we'd only known that they'd turned up angry. And I think there's a power in that, even in that day, or, you've talked about the longitudinal data, but instead of writing up incidents and, having big behavior, breaking out, being able to be preventative. Sorry, I just cut you off. That was so
no,
rude.
that's right. But that's sort of, no, it's perfect. But that's right. So we're able to use that. So I think being able to go great. It also meant that we then led to then creating a social skills. That same group kept having issues. So therefore we then set up like a social skills group for that,
Mhm.
at lunchtime. So those guys were able to, I suppose, let's say, deal with some of the issues that they were having. So rather than just go, oh, well, that's just that group of girls and they just, do this
Mm.
is what we did. This year, I know I went up to, we've got a couple of stage 3 classes, and 7 or 8 out of the 25, 26 students in the class all checked in tired, on the Monday. And so therefore I went up to the classes and sort of had a bit of a chat about, okay, like we're checked in tired. So then we had a big discussion about, well, what does your Sunday night routine look like? Are you on technology? Are you staying up late?
Mm.
What's going on there? And then we were able to bring that into our parent information night and say, okay, great, we've noticed that these, a third of our classes checking in tired on a Monday. Is this something we're able to bring to your attention to do that? So, doing those ones, and then that obviously sparked conversations then with several other parents who are like, oh, yes, they're staying up doing this or doing that. But it
Mm.
sort of reinforced that home school relationship as well by being able to have that conversation. And we had the data to show that this is how they're checking in each time. So it was sort of something that we probably, again, wouldn't have known because it wasn't an outward behavior. It was just I'm
Mm.
feeling like this constantly.
And I suppose I'm just curious, being able to have information from the student and their voice, does that help with the family engagement? Like, having different conversations with the family?
Um, yeah, I think it been really helpful with, we've had incidences before. I've got a couple that spring to mind. One where a student was going home, and I've seen it lots of times through my career where they'll say, "Oh, this person did this person did that. I don't like going to school. I'm really sad." But on the data, they're actually checking in happy each day. The teacher's seeing them happy. So by being able to then have the parent come in for a meeting, quickly snip their data off the dashboard and say, this is what we're seeing here. This is what they're telling us. So we can sort of start to unpack, well, what's happening for that student or why. Is there something going on at home that's, maybe the story's not quite adding up. We had another one where we had a student who's it was actually the mother had a couple of days off during the week, and so so the routine changed on the days she wasn't working. So instead of going to before school, she was coming to school right on bell time. Everything was a rush. Mum was having extra coffee in the morning because she had the day off, so she was taking an extra bit of time. So by actually having the data there, we could see that it was actually Wednesdays were getting worse, and then Thursday was the worst day. So we are in the meeting, our learning support team actually snipped the data, talked to mum. She's like, yes, this is, our routine on a Thursday. I'm rushed because there's more traffic because I'm coming to school later. So we're often getting right on bell time and it's a real rush. So she's now adjusted her routine on the Wednesday, Thursday to drop the kids off at school at 8:30 rather than bang on 9 o'clock, and is going to have a coffee after she takes the kids to school. So that was a kindergarten student issue. So
Wow.
really being able to have that, this is what we're
Mm,
seeing from the student, but you could then open up the question to the family to say, well, what's happening on a Thursday? And they're like, oh, actually. So yeah,
mm.
that was quite good.
I love hearing that because I think, if we also look at one of the other methods that we often collect this information, it's usually through anonymous surveys done, which are done, once or twice a year. And we're never really getting that voice and getting underneath. And we're usually, as you mentioned, we're in that reactive phase where we're looking at behavior, where we're either having to write up incidents, it's major, it's minor, what are we going to do? But being able to get underneath and actually find out what's happening to those young people and be able to see that over a longitudinal period of time. I suppose the big thing that I'm going to steer us back, because I know you and I could chat about this for so long, but I think you mentioned something really interesting right at the beginning. And, we've been around for nearly 20 years now, and I'm feeling incredibly old starting to say that. But one of the things, as we started off being a provider of social, emotional, and wellbeing programs into schools. And one of the things that I always used to say to communities around Australia is schools will often gravitate to a program. Like they'll be like, oh, we need a resilience program, or we need an anti-bully program, or we need a social skills program. And those programs sort of would come in and then they'd disappear. And it's kind of like, oh, for one term we'll have this dance or we'll have this kind of thing. And the inner the inability for that consistency, like you mentioned, like they'll grab and grasp and it's like this doesn't work, or we don't have data, or we can't measure the success. And this is a very actually, I think it's quite we've worked with over 150 of those schools that we were doing that with over a very long period of time. One of the things that we began to see was fatigue in teachers of, you mentioned first off, not another program. And I think one of the things from that fatigue for schools is it's really hard to implement and embed and have that change management. And one of the things that we worked with many of the communities when we were developing Life Skills Go was every school has to mark the role. It's compulsory. Like it's not an uplift. We're not losing teaching and learning times if we're using our check-in as part of the role in the morning and it becomes part of it. But it's a bigger piece than that. And I know that every school has a different approach, but I'd love to hear a little bit about how you introduced Life Skills Go initially to the school and what were some of those implementation things that you did right at the beginning around expectations, and just how you got that embedded.
So we started off with, so we initially decided that 3 check-ins a day would be perfect. Like that would be let's say, a gold standard, what we'd really love to do. So we set up with, let's have, basically morning with the role and then a recess and lunch check-in
Mm,
as they came in. Our original idea was to actually use an iPad.
mhm,
As they came in the room, just to sort of make that happen. But with sort of some departmental firewalls and other things, it actually came a little bit tricky to start with. So we ended up just keeping it up on the interactive whiteboard. But what's sort of become, where originally it was very much, oh, I don't want, kids and privacy and who's going to touch what. Now the kids just do it. Like it's not a
Mm,
thought process. Teachers just have it up on the board. So the expectation is that essentially that you come in from break. Now, obviously, there are times when people go out to sport for the afternoon or something and they don't check in and those little ones happen or they're on excursion and that's just normal everyday school life and that's totally fine, but I suppose the expectation is that it's done. If it's not done, normally I might, if I sort of notice that there's a class that hasn't done it for a couple of days for some reason, maybe there's a casual on and it hadn't been set up or whatever, then I'll just normally check in with the teacher and say, is everything okay? Are you having problems using it? If not, what can we do to help in that way? And that's where probably your staff have been really good as well as yourself, Nikki, in being able to go, hey, this isn't working for this person, you know, and just send an email to get that happening. So we did that, but we also did as part of our PL sessions as well. So staff professional
mm,
learning around what it was, how you can use the data, what you can see. In terms of looking at the data, I don't have it. We've been very explicit on. I don't expect you to then trawl through the check-ins either. Like you don't
mm,
need to sit there and go through every kid's check-in every day and say, "Oh my God, this kid was tired. I need to go and do
mhm.
that." Pay attention and just have a bit of an idea and see where people are at, and then you might be able to make a bit of a call on where that student's up to. So you might say, "Okay, great. I've noticed so and so's checked in angry today. I'm just going to go and have a quiet little chat." But that's where sort of I suppose my role as well is I might also check in and say, okay, great, how are you doing in that? In our inclusive ed setting, they often do like morning circles and things like that, where they'll have an open discussion around their feelings and how they are feeling. So they, in some of our ED classes, for example, the teachers checked in on the board with the discussion with the
Yeah.
students. So, it forms a part of their morning circle. So rather than being, say, within one of our mainstream classes where they'll just walk in and tap tap and move on their day, they'll structure it slightly differently. So there are different ways for them to implement it within their classroom and how they do it. But really just saying this is what it is, this is how we can use it. And then obviously, like I said, noticing patterns and then being able to bring it up with teachers and stuff so they can see. Because obviously we collect lots of data. Schools
Mm,
collect more data than anybody, but what do we actually do with it and what's the purpose?
mhm.
And if people don't see the purpose of why we're doing it, well, there's no point in doing it. So that's probably, being able to tailor it to the class or the needs of the class has been a really big part of implementing it. And then, as I said, showing them how we can use that data to benefit them and their staff.
I think it's a really, I mean, I did fall off my chair when you said 3 times a day. We we often say to schools, you want to have reliable, trustworthy data, and to get that consistency 3 times a week is really good. Like if you can get really good, sort of, get your whole school on 3 times a week, and that 3 times a day is, that's amazing, and that consistency. And I suppose I'd be really, the part that stands out for me is that investment in, and I know that we've actually taken a lot from your school and embedded it into the platform now around ensuring that people know why we're doing it. We've even done why the students are doing it, what they can do with it. So all of our onboarding now that's been digitized as well, a lot of it's been taken from incredible communities like you, and even down to assembly, sort of scripts, and also down to, family engagement and parent and teacher information that can go out there. But I think, one of the things, and I keep saying one of the things because I'm tired and it's weekend. I'm so sorry, that's very scrappy. Um,
That's all right.
that that leadership, to be able to say this is what we're doing and why we're doing it, and bring in that PL, because it makes sense. The data is surface for you, the insights are surface for you. You do get your weekly reports, your fortnightly reports, your stage reports, your whole school reports. And I think exactly like what you said, the last thing we want is more data for data's sake. But if we can see stages, or I love that scenario that you gave us about the year 3 girls with the, social skills. What are we doing with that, and how are we beginning to look at it differently? And also, how are we beginning to build better relationships with the young people? And, you know, from what I'm hearing, not only has the leadership been exceptional in your school, but it's also been consistent. And I think if you go back to your comment around, you know, every 3 years we bring something in and we throw it out, we bring something in and we throw it out. When it's deeply brought in, like it has been at your school and hundreds of other schools, and people feel that they're part of, and they're going on a journey with you, and you're also supporting them. I mean, I suppose I'd love to hear if there's any stories from the classroom. And I can give you a million stories, but it's not about me talking about it. But, you know, what do you hear back from your teachers that are able to, you know, and just for those people on the webinar this evening that might not know what we're talking about, the system does all the heavy lifting for you. So it'll aggregate all the data and it will lift. I love what you said about it's not chasing every, you know, every tired child. It, you know, it will flag children to have a look at if they are in a heightened state of emotion, because we know that they might end up in an incident. But in the morning, as our young people arrive, how do we know what state of readiness to learn are they in? And how is our class? Because we're not going to be diving, like if we come right back to what's happening in a classroom, you know, and we can go right up to how it aligns to SEF and the Victorian, you know, frameworks and how I can do all of those things. But at the end of the day, you know, schools are places for young people to come and learn. And as a teacher, I wouldn't want to start a class with 40% of my students ready to learn. I'd love to hear what are the stories from the classroom and how it might have helped them.
I think, like I said, probably one of the things that I've tried to get with staff, so in terms of how they might use it in their classrooms, if you know that a third of your class aren't ready to learn, then don't start the lesson, like have a movement break. So like I said, we do a lot of work around zones, a lot of work around Dan Siegel's model as well. So we link
Mm,
all of that stuff in as well. So if your kids aren't ready to learn, there's no point in starting the lesson. So I said, as a teacher, if you're looking and you're going, okay, great, yep, unsettled, 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 we're not ready to learn here. Okay, great, let's just do, whether it's something pattern and repeated, whether it's a breathing exercise, whether it's a movement because you're feeling everyone's a bit tired and a bit flat, whatever that may be, but feel free to use that within your classroom so that way when learning starts, you're ready to go. Because I think often, particularly with the pressures from a curriculum point of view, trying to
mm,
get through the mountain of things you need to get in, I think that's why that we really see the issues around like pressure. I've got to hurry up and get through this content before, but they're not going to learn the content anyway if they're not ready to learn. So I think staff being able to do that. I've had a couple as well where we've had some mandatory reports and things like that. That's another way where a teacher's been able to identify a few things as well.
mm,
So more than just being unsettled, there's been some other serious things that have probably come out of the data on top of that as well.
mm,
Um, and ultimately, I think one of the other things I really like out of it is just that student voice, is that
mhm.
sometimes it's nice just to tell people this is how I feel. I don't
Yeah.
need you to do anything. I just want you to know that I'm angry and that's okay.
And I think just to Dwayne's point there, I'm just going to jump in on that comment because I think, and Dwayne, you don't have to comment here, you can send it privately to me, but within the getting started guides now within Life Skills Go, if you go to the how to, the orange button, how to button, we actually have scripts for teachers to explain to the students why we're doing this. But I'm going to dovetail that into what you just touched on, Daniel, around, you know, remove all the data and the amazing reporting and the surveys and the lessons and the mindful, like, or, yeah, the brain breaks and the cognitive, like, remove all of that. When we have a look at, you know, we come back to how do we know our young people? And I'm going to lean on Dan Siegel's model because a lot of this is built off that, and I got to work with him. And the three S's, you know, how do we truly see, first S, how do we really truly see our young person in front of us? Not as the young person who was maybe up a tree throwing rocks yesterday, or not as the person who we've seen as big behavior incidents that we need to lift the lid and find out what's going on last year, but the young person who's turning up today. How do we see them for their needs? And often, how do we also begin to understand more than what their behavior is saying? And I often say that the bigger the behavior, the more they're screaming out for our, you know, for our attention and our help. If we can truly see them, and it might be just like you were saying, Daniel, you know, it's not about running in and fixing emotions. Sometimes it's just, hey, hey, buddy, bit sad today. Are you okay? oh, yeah, I just, if we can see them, they then begin to feel safe. And when they begin to feel safe, they begin to feel secure. And when they begin to feel secure, they then learn how to self soothe. And if we look at that model of child development and we look at that model of attachment theory, and then we bring it back and we overlay it around a sense of belonging, secure attachment, feeling safe in our environment. There is no child that does not want to be seen. They don't want to be seen. And letting them know that this is an opportunity for them, whether you're doing it anonymously or whether you're doing it like you're doing it, Daniel, on the interactive whiteboards. There are so many different ways for them to be able to share how they're feeling, knowing that emotions pass. It's not about running at it, within one day, but also letting them know that you care about them and you want to know what's happening for them and that you're just there for them. That in turn also lays such an incredible foundation of trust. And I can go on and on and on about that, Dwayne. And if you are working on the platform, our team and myself or Danny can reach out and support you with that. But we've seen, when we first started building the platform, I remember working in some really, really fantastic communities that, when we come back to how we are in Australia, it's usually, hey, Daniel, how are you? Great. How you feeling? Good.
Yeah,
What's going on?
yeah, good thing.
Not much. Like, and I think if we come back to the basis of, okay, teaching emotional literacy is in the form of self-regulation. That ability to be able to identify, communicate, and then learn how to manage our emotions is the first kind of cog in the Cassell model. And, I think that builds out, or we know that builds out a community of, like I'm hearing your young people sharing, being very comfortable sharing in front of people on interactive whiteboards. And we've got quite a lot of schools that have been with us of 7+ years now. And their reflection on starting out is initially it's like, oh, I don't want people to know how I feel. And then it's like, oh, they're just emotions. They come, they go, they change. And it builds our communities of empathy as well. So I hope I answered your question, Dwayne. And if I didn't, shoot me a message and I will absolutely follow that one up. Um, but I suppose one of the other things I'd say is, you know, if schools were new and starting out, Daniel, like what would be your sort of your non-negotiables, or you would have had some trials and errors and learnt some things along the way. What would you say to them?
Well, I think, look, going back to Dwayne's point as well, like in terms of that starting point, um, like I said, kids sometimes can be a bit reluctant when something's new. So we went through all that. We had some classes where teachers would make kids spin around and face the back of the wall, like back of the room, while
Mm,
someone else touched the board, because it was like that. Where now, like I said, if you walked into our stage 3 class or whatever else, who've been doing it for the last, I don't know how many years we've been doing it for
mm,
now, but walk in, tap tap, and it's not even a thought process. It's no different to clicking the balloon or anything else. We also have been working on like the emotion cards,
mm,
because one of the things that I found was that there are some kids who don't necessarily really have a great understanding of their own emotions. We've got one little guy who probably default emotion tends to be anger at
mhm,
certain points, but he would actually check in angry even when he had a giant smile on his face, and didn't really know when he was angry or happy or anything else. He'd always just check in the same.
mm,
So that really highlighted for me that it wasn't necessarily the emotion he was feeling, it was actually his understanding of what those emotions were. So in that classroom, well, then I will say, great, let's really focus in on what does that look like? What does that feel like? What does that sound like? How can we tell? So really going back to some of that, and that was a year 1 class, but yeah, really probably boiling down to to digging down into those things would be something that I would say is really important to do first. Because it goes back to that name it to tame it
mm,
sort of thing as well. So over time, it just became part of the process. Same for, like I said, if in terms of staff, it's just what you do. So
mm,
it's not a matter of, oh, I've got to do this or do that. No, part of the thing is just flick it up on your board. If you need help, I'll come up. Well, this year we have several first year out teachers, and we've also got a teacher who's been at another school for 20 odd years and who's moved over, and it's the first time she's used the platform. So I just went up, dropped into the room. How's it going? Do you need some help? Oh, I'm not sure of this. Yep, here you go.
Mm.
Easy as done. And then after a couple of weeks, it's just become normal part of all of their lives. They're every day at the school. And I know there's this, we've got a little girl who has autism in our mainstream class, and she was actually running late to school one day, about week 3, week 4, but she'd missed the check-in. And so she actually had a meltdown because she didn't get to tap the board and do the
Mm.
check-in. So she didn't care about being late. That was sort of her big one. So for her, and she's been late once or twice other, but now I know that trigger for her is she really wants to just do the check-in. So we actually just throw it up on the board and she just checks in,
Mm.
and that's
It's
okay. So
amazing, isn't it? It's and part of what you just said too is, as an organization, we had the assumption that, and it was probably the wrong, it was definitely, if I look back now at our assumption um, that we'd all be, comfortable about teaching emotional literacy. It's part of the curriculum, off we went. And we realized over time that we were running so much professional learning and so many PDs that we've now included that into the platform. So there's lessons on, teaching the basic emotions. And I love that you're using those resources. We worked really hard on ensuring that we had the resources. And also, in case you haven't looked recently, we've updated them now. So we've got on the back of them strategies and how to feel, and also teaching out more really around that somatic understanding, like exactly like that little man that you were saying that, he got caught on saying angry. And I remember a mainstream school, I was talking to one of the principals in the early days, and she said to me, I had this little guy and he kept checking and he was sad, but he was just smiling and walking around and he was happy. And I went over and I said, Hey, buddy, what's going on? Are you really sad? He goes, No, I just wanted to know that you knew. And I want to know if you looked at what I'd said. And that comes back to, again, every child wanting to be seen. So it's not only have we got that ability where we can slowly, and I use the word slowly because, and I'm working from home tonight, so there might be something flying at my head, but um, if I said to my husband, How are you feeling? Often he'll say, Good, fine, tired, stressed. Like if we look at best or trauma informed best practice, the smallest, most consistent thing we can do every day. Beginning to learn to identify an emotion, how are we feeling? Let's use the language and beginning to understand that in our body somatically, and taking that through has huge bodies of evidence to be able to build out the skills and the tools that we need for our young people to thrive in the world. I suppose just as we're sort of moving towards the back end, for you as a wellbeing officer, what has been something that has surprised you the most? Like, what would, yeah, that's kind of just a random question. What's something that surprised you the most?
um, I guess in terms of like, to be honest, when we started, we were looking for a whole school approach. We were completely redoing our well-being, going from, I suppose, a reactive system into proactively trying to, teach staff that, about the brains and trauma and
Mm.
all the things now that I suppose departmentally we're hopefully shifting towards. But in terms of that, just that there probably were so many kids feeling certain ways at school during each
Mm.
day. And yeah, but overall, like, you can, that even though we still have lots of kids who are checking in tired or angry at different points, overall, if you look at our data, the majority of our kids on majority of our days are checking in happy. And I
Mm.
think sometimes we spend a lot of time, particularly in the well-being space, we're dealing with the real pointy end kids who are having really bad days. And sometimes, you probably feel a little bit along those ways that, are these kids happy? Are we
Mm.
doing the best for them, whatever else? But, it's only, again, a very small percentage of our kids that are checking in those ways. But by being able to use the system, not only can it be a positive reinforcement, not just
Yeah.
the negative, because I think sometimes we all get caught up in the, oh my God, this kid's got this, or this poor little guy's got, this going on for them, or whatever else it might be.
Mm.
Whereas this is actually showing consistently that our data is showing that, what, these kids are here and they're happy to be here and they're learning and they've got friends and they're doing those things. And I think that's probably one of the, I won't say surprising because you always want to think kids are happy to be there and
Mm,
generally, but like I said, sometimes we do get caught down in the negative, particularly in schools, and we get bogged down in,
mm,
oh my God, this poor kid, this and all that. Whereas the overall, overwhelming majority are happy to be there.
mm.
The other thing I'd like to look at the data for is we're looking, around linking it in with our other data. So things like our attendance data, for example, our Tuesdays is our worst attended day.
Mm.
So why, we're trying to look into that now and go, okay, why is
Oh,
that? Is there something that
Daniel, I'm going to
happens?
pause you there. That's
Why?
been done for you. That's actually done for you.
Yeah.
I'm going to get Danny to
Have
book a
you? There you go.
time to walk you through that.
Yeah,
So, taking that behavior and taking the attendance and taking the check ins and triangulating it, that's all done for you. Just
perfect. I
another
love
report that
that.
we'll have to take you
So
into. So, yeah,
excellent.
there we go. We can do that for you.
That's all right.
Because
Another swing to the bow,
that's
Nikki. Well
there
done.
we go. Well, I think that's where you're going to get that really rich data too, because you mentioned around the lady who was having issues getting to her young person to school on the Wednesday and the Thursday, and it was really escalating on the Thursday. It'll surface all of this. Those reports surface this for you, and those patterns are there. Also triangulating that with, oh wow, we're angry on a Tuesday. We've got a partial attendance on a Wednesday. We've got a full, we're not actually arriving at school on the third. There's just so much there. I think will blow your mind by showing you that new report. I will make sure that someone jumps onto it. It
Right,
was
I look
only
forward to
just
that.
released. So you haven't been, we haven't held back the goodies from you. But I think that, again, they're the things that we heard was, how do we begin to work together to really make the system do the heavy lifting to ensure that you're not having to be a data analyst and not having to sit there all day analyzing data and things like that is really, we wouldn't have known these things if we hadn't have heard back from communities of, I spend my time pulling this report or this report or this report. And our team's done a remarkable job, particularly with School Bites, of being able to do that for you and be able to lift that up. So that's a little takeout for me for you, Mr. Daniel.
Oh, thank you. No, very good. Thank you.
There you go. Tick any other wish list that you've got this evening.
Yes, sure. I'll get them up.
Yeah. And I just want to
But
say,
yes, I think, look,
mm,
no, go. That's all right.
no, I
I
was
was
just
going to
going to
say,
pass
yeah,
over
but
to
in
you.
terms of the program, yeah, that's right. Yeah, look, I think that being able to, we've been playing around with tailoring the different emotion, emoticons, whatever you want to call them,
Mm,
with the rainbows and faces and things like that. That's something that we've, to be honest with you, we've really only scratched the surface with. And I know it's something we've spoken about as well in terms of, how many emotions do we have and how do we, best meet the needs of the different classes and stuff like that. So, in terms back to even Dwayne's stuff about starting up and things like that, that's something that we've sort of generally standardized across most of the
mm,
classes. But, again, we've been able to tailor that with, we've got a younger autism class, which is a K to 2 with a lot of non-verbal kids in that classroom. So again, things like the rainbow and the clouds and things like that is another way of being able to probably tailor that in. So that's been good.
and thank you. And I think, that customization piece to be able to work with our autism units, but also mainstream, but customized to different areas. And it really, yeah, I just want to thank you so much. I'm sitting here smiling away and just working with schools like you that are incredibly proactive and that are really looking at, how do we support our young people. Had an amazing meeting with Andrew Smith from Education Services Australia today, and he said, we've been trying, I'm going to quote someone, I'm going to get it completely wrong, so please bear with me. We were talking about, the gaps, the gaps in the way that we're viewing young people and the gaps of how we as education as a whole. And one of them is, he said, we're trying to solve it with problems, with systems that are so old and bringing in contemporary new ways of working. And as someone who has been around fighting in this space for a long time, who was once seen as being very peace, love, and mung beans when I was kind of, trying to bring all of this through the department and through into schools and through into education, to sit there with someone of his caliber today and to listen to that and know that we're not finished. This is just the beginning. We're continuously growing and learning and solving different problems, but we couldn't solve those problems without communities and schools like yours and many others on this webinar this evening. I'm going to set you free because thank you so much for volunteering and sharing your knowledge. Yeah, again, I'm in awe, and it's in the community sharing. What we've found is often schools will be doing remarkable jobs, but how do we share that knowledge with other areas? And tonight, that's just been an amazing demonstration of exactly what you've done, how you've done it, and the benefit that it's been for your community. And we love supporting your school and adore working with you. And I just want to say a huge, big thank you, Daniel.
No worries. Thanks, Nikki, and thanks everyone for joining us. And Nikki, if you want to bring the team up to Shortland, you're always welcome to
Yeah.
come up for a visit
We're
and
coming.
look in real
We are
well.
coming. We are definitely coming. I can't wait to come up and see you all. And thank you to everyone who's taken the time in week 8, at 7 o'clock at night to be on here. It's been a very well populated webinar. So yeah, have a wonderful, wonderful evening. Take care of yourself for the rest of the term. This recording will go out. If you don't mind just taking a moment to fill out the survey to help us know what else we can do and what we can support you with. And Daniel, once again, have a beautiful evening and rest well. And we will be up there. I will ring you before Friday to organise a visit trip. I've been threatening it for too long now. I'm coming. That's it. Okay.
Sounds
Take
good.
care. Thank you. Thanks so much.
No worries.
Bye,
Thanks, Nikki.
everyone.